Even more people are now out of work in South Africa, according to the latest statistics. The country's unemployment rate has gone up to 34.9%. That's really almost 35%. Let's get more details now on the third quarter jobless rate from my colleague, business editor here at eNCA, Devin Morgan. Devin, good afternoon. Was this largely expected? I mean, there's no surprise really, is there?
No, really, there isn't any surprise, Brad, given the state of the economy, given a lot of things impacting from COVID-19 to the right. So Statistics South Africa has revealed that between July and September, 7.6 million people were unemployed. And that's the number of people when you translate the percentage. Under the expanded definition of unemployment, which includes those who have stopped looking for work, that rate is even worse. Let's take a closer look on those numbers very quickly. So official unemployment rate between July and September, there you go, 34.9%. And look at the amount of people out of work when you consider the expanded definition where people have just discontinued looking for work, 46.6%. It translates to 12.5 million people. Now, analysts say the continued impact of COVID-19, a lack of investment, slow structural reforms, including erratic electricity supply, are making it hard for the economy to absorb labour. Let's take a closer look at one of the big issues when it comes to unemployment, that youth bracket between 15 and 24 years old. Take a look at the unemployment rate, 66.5%. But if that was frightening, what's even more concerning to many analysts and experts is this little bracket called NEET. Now, what it stands for is a bracket that shows those individuals that are not in employment, education or training. In the bracket between 15 and 24, there are just over 10 million people. And what's alarming, of course, is the fact that 3.4, almost 3.5 million of these youngsters between the ages of 15 and 24 are not in any form of employment, education or training. So that's the revelation from the latest statistics. Let's just go on and see what's the province's pictures like and compare that unemployment rate to the overall unemployment rate. You can see the Eastern Cape there, almost half of the working age population in the Eastern Cape are without work. And that's just the official figure. It's not expanded. KwaZulu-Natal, where we saw those riots earlier in July, have also increased 28.7%. You may think it's lower than the Eastern Cape, but in terms of the population and its ratio, that is a worrying figure. One last point before we move on, Brian, is the fact that the formal sector, 660,000 people who were employed in the formal sector actually lost their jobs. So there were job slashing that took place over and above the fact that more entrants are coming into the labour market. So you have a dual situation there, not a great picture. The government has to work harder together with business to make this economy more labour absorbing, Bradan.
Thank you very much, Devin. The picture is not really looking good at all. But now with more and more people losing their jobs, that unemployment rate now, as Devin was telling us, sitting at around 34.9%, it's a gloomy picture. Not surprising, though. Let's unpack now this, get some analysis after we've seen the figures from Devin Morgan. I'm going to speak to Mamokgethi Molopyane, an independent labour analyst. Mamokgethi, you would agree, of course, that these numbers are not surprising at all, especially on the back of the July riots.
Yes, absolutely, Braden. The numbers are not surprising. Perhaps what is alarming is that we are failing as South Africa and arguably as the government to respond to the rate of unemployment that is increasing, but also in the economy stimulus package, but also in the economy recovery plan and all the task team and sessions we've put in place as government. It seems we are unable to come up with ways in which we can either stall the number of unemployment increasing or job losses or jumpstart the economy such that it's able to retain the job that it has or create jobs. And that is worrying, Braden. I mean, when you look at those figures that Devon unpacked there, just the context for your viewers, we are looking at 11.5 million unemployed people. That is the broader definition. That's about 7.6 million active job seekers and 3.9 million discouraged workers who are discouraged from looking for work. And within that number, as we have seen, it is the number of young people or people of working age populations that have a higher number and even a higher percentage compared to the national average. And that is quite alarming. And that is saying to us, government policies are unable to respond to the challenges and the impact that COVID has had on, one, the economy, but also itself. Government policies cannot respond to unemployment for the longer term, by the way. It's not just now.
Now, if that's the case, I guess one of the key questions, if not the key questions we should be asking is, how do these millions of unemployed people survive?
Well, many of them, as we have seen over the past couple of months with the social relief grants, the distress grants that has been given to people and the extension thereof and the child grant, those are the income of some sort that is enabling people to survive. But over and above, we have seen since the pandemic, even before the pandemic, that the level of poverty and hunger is slowly increasing. We are regressing as a country from the battles we have won a couple of years ago of trying to reduce poverty and hunger. But now food security becomes an issue, understandably so, because it is linked directly to one's ability to generate an income. I mean, when you look at Q3, almost more than 500,000 people lost jobs. That's 660, almost 1 million people lost jobs in that, or were less employed than the others, than the Q2. So that's quite concerning, moving into a period of that we are now seeing a fourth wave of the pandemic, and that means we are going to see more job losses. Perhaps something that we talk about all the time in South Africa, that we are shocked that the numbers are this high, that we are shocked that the percentage increases, but yet somehow government continue to with its austerity policy, something that I argue about and write about frequently in my columns, that up until government stop with its austerity policies that are containing how they are spending and justifying it by saying we cannot spend. Instead, we are taking a finance policy that looks towards generating a surplus. A surplus for what? In a country that has unemployment crisis. And how is that surplus spent? Because we know that allocation is not the challenge, but how allocation is spent and where it is spent. And we are seeing that although there is money that governments give to various departments, none of them has been targeted directly at job creation. And you cannot talk about the YES initiative because it really was not a success. You cannot talk about the tax incentives for employing graduates, because that also has not helped, as we are seeing with the stats, Braden, that unemployed graduates number is even increasing.
Yeah, and the calls for a basic income grant are rising. And as you said, the numbers could worsen when we get the Q4 ones, particularly because we've seen the impact of Eskom's blackouts.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That has direct impact on economic activity and companies' ability to continue their production processes. And where production halts and nothing happens, that impacts on the company's ability to generate profit, be it at a cost of labor. And when we know that when they cannot, when the private sector companies cannot generate profit, one way where the rate of profit is falling, one way to deal with that impact on themselves as private sector is to counteract what is affecting the rate of profit. And one way to do so is to retrench people or make workers redundant or bring in capital equipment that makes production less reliant on workers. So over time, the impact of Eskom in the longer term is going to lead to, in the shorter term, small job losses. But in the longer term, companies are going to find alternatives of production that has less worker, but it also that is less reliant on Eskom. And that obviously is going to affect the SOE.
And finally, and very briefly, Mamokgethi, just your thoughts about in the short to medium term, how should we expect, besides the social grant, the poor of this country, the poor people, millions of them who are unemployed now, to survive? I mean, the social grants are there, but there's an argument about whether they are enough or not, and they're helped, but there's a call for a basic income grant. That's still in the works, so to speak. Discussions are happening. If there was something else that you believe government could tweak to make sure that the millions of unemployed South Africans who are poor, the numbers are rising, do somehow survive, what would you advise government to do in the short to medium term?
Well, it has to continue. It has no choice but to continue with the social grant, and even to a point, introduce the basic income grant as soon as possible and stop debating about it. Because the challenge is that, and I know argument is that we have a spending problem, but when you look at spending relative to the rest of the world and countries, government spending, you'll be shocked. The point here is that, Braden, we need to increase the relief grant that people are getting, because without it, the millions that are unemployed, the 11.6 million that are employed, will not have food, and we are going to see poverty increase. And that is something that government needs to do, is in terms of allocation. It has to allocate more money to alleviating the distress caused by job loss, income loss. And as such, one way to do so that has been effective is through social grants, and relief grants, and slightly, possibly even where possible, to increase it.
Thank you very much. Independent Labour analyst Mamokgethi Molopyane, just sharing with us some of her thoughts and analysis of the latest record high unemployment numbers. It's like there's a jobs bloodbath in the country in the third quarter, of course. And things are not going to get any better, judging by where we are regarding the pandemic as well, plus the impact of the recent Eskom blackouts on jobs and different industries like manufacturing and mining. We'll have to wait and see what those numbers are going to look like. But currently, it's a gloomy picture all around.